Cool. Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist. I wasn't expecting on seeing that plane go flying by. That was cool. Anyway, today I wanted to talk a little bit about the housing market. Housing prices are continuing to climb, very much different from what everybody has been anticipating for the last 2.5 years. Ultimately, the idea that when the Federal Reserve raised interest rates, the housing market was going to crash. Like, you were going to see prices come down, people were going to go into foreclosure, we were going to have this mass chaos taking place within the housing market, and everybody who has been waiting for their opportunity would be able to pick up a house for dirt cheap. Like, this is what a lot of people were anticipating. I mean, I don't know how many people within the comments section of my videos was telling me that I was going to be underwater, I was going to get burned, I was going to lose everything I had, I was going to be like on the streets again after I had purchased my house 2.5 years ago. I mean, I was in like mentally a horrible shape, a horrible place when I was trying to buy the house, because I was very much in the belief that I was going to be underwater once the interest rates went up and the housing prices came down. This was so much of what a lot of people believed out there. Now, the Federal Reserve raised rates, or started to raise rates, and the mortgage rate shot up right away. Like, they didn't go in lockstep with the Federal Reserve. When the Fed started making their announcements of quantitative tightening, where they were going to unwind their balance sheet and begin to let the mortgages roll off that balance sheet, where they would not be purchasing more, the markets anticipated that move and immediately found ground. It shot interest rates up on mortgages up to 7 and 8%, and they pretty much plateaued at that the entire time. Now, when we have credible threats that hit the markets, like we did at the end of last year, this eases financial conditions, and you can see where there's like the mortgage market begins to improve, where you find more people are taking out loans to buy homes, and this is off of the idea that they would be able to refinance going into the future. Now, just think about some of the situations that a lot of people are facing right now. They can't afford to get into a house. They can't afford the payments on the interest. They can't make the down payment on account of the principal, on account of the not putting enough principal down. Right? So this is the situation in which that a lot of people are facing. And so they are postponing their purchase. This is creating demand. A lot of people don't think that. Like, they don't think that the demand is there when the capabilities of these people disappear. They still want the house. They still demand it. The problem is just that they're not capable. So they no longer register as part of the demand, right? But they're still very much there, still very much wanting a house, knowing that they just can't afford the position that they are in right now. So when you think about what is it that is going to create a housing market crash where you actually see the prices come down, you're going to have to see inventory, people selling homes. Now, when it comes to people selling homes, you're either forced into it or you're choosing to do it, right? Those are the only two options, right? Either you're forced to or you're choosing to. And so if you are choosing to do it, well, it'd have to be favorable for you, not only to get the price that you're looking for, which is possible, but then you would also have to be able to then get yourself into another home. Now, this becomes more difficult. So the people who own homes, who would typically sell those homes, maybe go and move to another area and purchase again, are now backing off because they are not able to purchase another home, at least in a favorable condition for themselves. So they back out. So it's not like there's going to be new inventory from people who are choosing to sell. It would have to come from people who are forced to sell. Now, why would you be forced to sell? Well, probably because you lost your job and you're not able to make the payment. Maybe you had a death in the family. Maybe there's just some other circumstances that are just unforeseen that force you into a selling position, even if you didn't want to be. Right? So how many of this type of scenario is actually going to be prevalent within the market that would then create a higher inventory? Well, it's not necessarily going to come from like divorces. I mean, I guess it could, or maybe older people like, passing away or something of that nature. But this isn't like a generally speaking condition in which that is going to extremely elevate the inventory, right? I mean, it might add some to it, but not in a significant fashion. What's going to take place is have to come from foreclosures, people actually failing to make the payment, and therefore selling the house short because the prices come down. See, if you're in a position in which says you're going into foreclosure and the house prices are elevated, just sell the house. Just sell it to sell it. Right? Nothing happens to you. In fact, you might even be able to walk away with a little bit of money because of the elevated prices out there. So why would you foreclose? That doesn't make any sense. Right? It would just like, you would make sense to foreclose on a house that you were underwater on, but not if the value of the house is elevated. You just sell it. Right? Sell it for what you owe on it, and then you're not, then you don't have to worry about, screwing up your credit or having the foreclosures or anything else like that happen. So unless we see like layoffs rising significantly, see that unemployment rising significantly, then I don't know where it is that the foreclosures is going to be bringing new inventory to the market. Now that list leaves us with the home builders. The home builders are going to be the last place that you can look to bring new inventory in if you don't have a significant rise in unemployment and layoffs. So what's an easy way to see how excited the builders are? By looking at the lumber industry. Like, if there is a lot of demand for lumber, then you would probably see that there is going to be activity happening within the building industry. But that's not happening right now. Lumber mills are shutting down. In fact, I just read where another one has just shut down here in Oregon, and that's like a dozen of them this year. Think about that. Oregon is like the #1 lumber producing state out of the entire nation, and they're shutting down lumber mill operations. This is a significant sign of the times coming to the home builders, to the new construction industry. Now, I know that a lot of people are out there just saying, just wait and see, just wait, right? Well, I've been just waiting for a housing market crash for a very long time. And when I was in a position in which I had no other choice, it was either, dude, you have to leave, or you're going to have to find a house to buy. But there's no place to rent because the moratoriums that they have going at the time, nobody was getting kicked out or evicted out of their homes. There was literally nothing for me. So I was forced into purchasing a home at a time in which that I wanted to wait and see. I wanted to wait and see what was going to happen with the housing prices because I knew for sure that I was going to be able to pick up a house at a cheaper price. You know what the reality of the situation is? I would not be able to buy my own home today. The one that I am in 2.5 years later, I would not be able to buy this home. I wouldn't be able to afford the interest payment, and I wouldn't have had the down payment. Not at the price that it's ZELLE estimated at, which I understand, may or may not be accurate. Okay, whatever, right? Home prices have continued to elevate throughout the entire nation in the 20 major cities. Portland, the closest major city to me, had gone up the least, 1%. Right? Point is, it still went up. It didn't go down. And the fact that it's going up has now eliminated a lot of people out of the ability to even buy a house. That is pent up demand. That is not recognizable. Because these people are not capable, they then fall off of the demand. Right? It's important to understand this because the moment that prices come down, demand will explode. All these people who are out of the game will then be in the game, and you will have an overabundance of demand. The prices can't come down in that situation. The only thing that you can look towards is supply and demand. Supply issues. That's where the problem is. And it's going to continue to be that way going into the future. If you do not have activity within the building industry, that's a gap in production. Okay? That means less homes are being built during that time. But the reality of population continues to grow. Like they don't put a gap in population growth, right? There might be, but it's not like it matches the gap in builders, starting homes. It doesn't match that. Right? That gap in production is going to be a ripple effect throughout the economy for many years to come. And the more we face this situation of the elevated interest rates, that are now creating a problem situation for the buyer, why would the builder be in that? The builder wants to be confident that their homes that they build will sell. And if they're not confident, they're not going to build. And this is one of the situations that we are finding today. You can look at it in the new building starts. You can look at it permit issuance. You can see it in, the lumber industry itself with the lumber futures under 500 per thousand. Anything under 500 per thousand, the mills are not profitable. In fact, they're barely profitable at 500 per thousand. So right now, when we're at 490, you know that these mills are not doing well. And this is the preliminary, the indication of what it is that's happening out there. You watch and see. When you see lumber start to pick up in price, and I mean significantly pick up because of the builder demand, you're going to find where the lumber inventory is not prevalent enough out there to meet a significant demand. And the lumber prices will shoot up. And the price of building a home will then go up again. And you have to think about it, like, how much does a house cost to replace it? See, people say, oh, a house should be worth $200,000. Really? Can you build a house for $200,000? I mean, can you replace a house for $200,000, considering the labor costs, considering the permitting, considering all the building materials, all the stuff that goes into it? Yeah, you probably can't. So if you can't replace a house for $200,000, then why do you think you should be able to buy one for $200,000? All right, I'm gonna have to make this a fairly short one for you guys because I only have I guess I've got about 20 minutes left. So, all right, normally I do 45 minutes. This is only gonna be about a half an hour or so. All right, the last time to purchase a house in the bottom of the cycle was 2020, and the time to sell was this year as the peak. Okay. And so, I mean, I think, like, that's if you're in the idea of, like, flipping a house, right? But see, I was in the position in which that I wanted to live in the house. And people say, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're just planning on living in the house. No, it does matter. It matters a lot for your own psyche, right? To think, okay, well, I'm in a house that's underwater, meaning I can't even get out from underneath it. You feel like a prisoner in it, regardless if you were planning on staying there or not. But if that house all of a sudden goes up in price and you got a lot of equity in it, well, you feel real happy about being in there, even though nothing has changed. Just your psyche, right? Just the way you feel about the situation that you're in. And so I don't think about, like, the time to buy and the time to sell. I think about the time to buy and how it is that you are going to be able to deal with that position for the foreseeable future. That's really where I think it's probably most important. And if you are sitting in a position in which that you are completely underwater on a house, that's probably not going to feel real good. So again, as long as the house price has moved up somewhat, most people are probably going to feel fairly decent about the position that they are in. And I would imagine that would be pretty much everybody, since house prices continue to go up. And now for the few people who bought at an elevated price that may have seen the value come down, it is a very few amount of people. I mean, think about how many mortgages have been issued in the last 2 years. Less, far less. Mortgage lenders are being decimated because less mortgages are being issued. So if there's less mortgages being issued, that means there's less people purchasing homes during a time of these elevated prices. If prices come down, there's only going to be a handful of people who are underwater. I mean, I think about my own home. I could have $100,000 come off the price tag of my house and I would still not be underwater. I mean, the house price can move a lot. And I only purchased my house 2.5 years ago. So I don't know where all these people are, like, talking about how there's going to be this downturn in housing prices and all of a sudden all these people are going to be in foreclosure or something like that. Like, they're wishful thinking. That's not happening. That's not happened yet. And the more that time goes on, the more those prices elevate, the further away from issues I'm at. Like, it's more of an issue for everybody else who hasn't purchased a house. But for me, my issue is going underwater. That is a long ways away from me now. The further the time goes on, the more confident that I am in a good position on my house. Like, people were telling me, you give it a couple of years and you're going to be crying your eyes out. Completely opposite of that. I am not crying my eyes out in any way. In fact, I can't believe it, because one of the best decisions that I have ever made, and I didn't want to do it at the time. Like, I was that scared. You know, it was like, man, this is horrible. This is the worst decision I could possibly be making right now. No, it was the best. It was the best decision I had ever made. I bought in 2006. In 2008, I was $100,000 underwater. I wanted to slit my wrist. Now I have $650,000 in equity. Right, Ash? Right? Exactly. Like, I bought in 2007, and I couldn't keep the house. I ended up going into foreclosure. It was a horrible experience for me, and it took me like a decade to recover from it. You know, it took a long time. And I look back at the house that I let go into foreclosure, and man, that thing is like, I don't even know how much it sold for, but right now it's probably worth 3 times, you know, what I had let it go for. All right. Alternate asset manager like Blackstone is another name for publicly traded equity. I was buying the crash story too, but when I looked how my income tripled, I still have half of it left over for retirement. I realized the fear wasn't necessary at all. Yeah, I hear you. But that's just the thing. Like, I know a lot of people who are in real estate. I mean, I know some people who really got a lot of real estate. And it's really interesting to listen to their stories, because all of them at one time had to buy their first property. And every single one of them talked about how of a gut-wrenching experience it was. How they thought, man, this is a bad decision. It's going to sink me. I'm not going to be able to do this. You know, I'm going to lose it all, whatever. And it's funny, because I've asked a few people about this now too, because there's really Matthew who had said this to me. And so I asked a few people, I'm like, hey, when you go to buy a property, is it tough? Does it make you gut wrench? And yeah, every time, every single property, no matter what it is, no matter how many they have, it's just the experience of it. It's just something about it. And most people are so scared that they don't want to face that fear. So they'll just put out like this idea that, no, today's the bad time, is all this horribleness. Think about all these reasons. Well, they're scaring themselves right out of the ability to get a home. Okay? And then even if you're getting a home, it's still a scary experience. Over time, that fear eventually goes away, and, you know, the acceptance of the situation and feeling much better about it starts to take over. Like, it doesn't happen that way for everybody. I know I experienced a foreclosure in my past. I bought at the wrong time and could not make my payments over time and failed. Now, if I tried a little harder and wasn't drunk and wasn't stupid, I might have been able to hold on to that house. And if I had, I would be in a far better position than I am today. But that's not what happened. All right? A whole different story took place. And I'm somewhat fortunate that it did. I learned a lot of lessons from it, and I wouldn't have been in a position to take on the idea of or try to understand what it was that took place, so that I could actually be in a position to start a YouTube channel. Like, none of that would have happened if it wasn't for the foreclosure. So I'm almost thankful for it, even though it took 10 years out of my life. It was 10 years of lesson that I needed to learn. What time is it? All right, I got a few more minutes here. China's housing market is in a major correction. It's really no different from what we have going on here. No, stay curious. It is very different. It's a very different situation that has taken place here than what was taking place in China. They had a real estate property boom, very similar to what we had experienced during the Great Financial Crisis, but it's not the same thing. And those property developers over there, they're sucking. They're like not doing well at all. And the problem that they are facing is that they're trying to prevent a contagion effect from ripping across their country. And now the problem is that everybody is like basically leveraged off of everybody else. And so if you can imagine, like, you have this property developer, this major corporation, and they have contractors out there as well, right? So they're hiring all these different people. They pay these contractors a lot of time in something called commercial paper. Commercial paper is essentially a loan, right? So when you hand somebody commercial paper, you're essentially, say if you're paying them $100, you'll pay them a commercial paper that is worth $100, but if they hold on to it for a year, they might get a little interest and get like, say, $102 for it. You know, something just to kind of give you an idea of how this works. So when they pay these contractors or pay these other businesses, they will take that commercial paper and put it on their balance sheet as an asset. Right? Now, this asset on their balance sheet, you know, if they give it some time, will eventually turn into, you know, the cash that they are looking to receive from it. But as this asset sits on their balance sheet, if the company, the issuing company starts to fail, well, the chances of them paying that commercial paper really starts to fall and the asset price begins to diminish. So now all these businesses that are tied to these property developers who have taken on commercial paper as payment are now looking at their balance sheet start to fall dramatically, right? Their liabilities now exceed their assets and they start falling into default and foreclosures and bankruptcies themselves. And so on goes the problem. Now, this is what China is facing because of their property developers, and they're doing everything they can to stem the tide, to stop it from happening, to keep the outflow. And it's very difficult for them. They are constantly trying to stimulate and support and, you know, and prop up that industry, but it's like, you know, it just keeps collapsing on them. So, you know, give it time. I'd imagine it eventually will find its bottom, but in the meantime, they are facing some serious consequences on account of that. It's not the same thing that's happening here. Yeah. Now, give it time, it might, but like, I don't see the commercial real estate, which is, you know, in havoc, I guess is the only way to really describe it, but it's not driving down or destroying the corporations in such a significant fashion that the government or the Fed or somebody has to step in and start doing something about it. It's almost like controlled demolition. You have to let a lot of the malinvestment, irrational exuberance to extinguish itself. Like you let the undergrowth burn out so that the forest can grow again. So that burning out of the undergrowth, that's the bad investments, that's the malinvestments, that's the issues in which that people had taken money, thrown it at a project with the anticipation of being able to have these huge gains off of it, but it was completely unrealistic and that project fails. They have to fail, right? Once all that stuff has burned out, now you have room to reestablish and grow again. But you have to get rid of all the zombies, essentially. And that's really what the Federal Reserve is doing right now, is allowing the zombies to die. Right? They've been on the hunt for quite some time. We did videos on this a long time ago, but it's not so recognizable to a lot of people. So it's hard to say, hey, the Federal Reserve is allowing failure to take place to get rid of the bad investments, the malinvestments out there, the irrational exuberance. But that's ultimately what's taking place. All right, thank you so much for the $2. Far from jaded. It's not 3xing in 3 years, maybe like 1.25, and that's it. Are we talking about housing? I mean, even still, like watching the house price, here's something that I thought was really interesting. About, 6 months or so, maybe a little bit around after I had purchased the house, I'm watching the ZELLE estimate on this house going up every month, right? Like by a significant amount. And 1 month, it literally went up more than I could earn at my day job. My wife earned at her day job. Through all the YouTube, all the stuff that I try to do for income, like the bingo, the YouTube, the day job, my wife's day job, all this stuff, all that combined was not as much as what the house had gone up in a month. Like the house would go up more than I could earn. That's ridiculous. That should not exist ever, should that take place. But yet it was happening. And so I wasn't surprised when I watched a significant amount come off of the ZELLE estimate. It was just like, it just didn't make any sense to watch it go that high that fast. But where it is settled right now for the last few months, which I haven't seen a whole lot of price increasing, is still significantly higher than what I had paid for it and far above what I owe. And again, like I'm in a position now where I could not even buy my own home. All right. Americans will never own houses again. The World Economic Forum said it will rent forever, no matter market conditions. And I really think that's going to be the case regardless of what those people said. Right? I don't think the World Economic Forum, like I'm not scared of those people. They don't control me or my life. You know, they might control other people because they give them that meaning. I don't give them that meaning. They don't control my life. But regardless of the World Economic Forum, I think that's going to be the case anyway. Like, I don't think most people are going to have the opportunity to ever own a home or own property in general. Like, I mean, they might own land or something, but they're not going to really be able to do much with it. And I really do feel that to be the case. And it's not because of the government or the World Economic Forum or all this other stuff. It's because this is what Cantillon described literally hundreds of years ago. Is that the concentration of wealth is obvious in the property owners. And that at some point, the property owners own it all. There's a huge separation between them and the lower end. And the lower end is the most populated part of the economy. And when the new money turns off, everybody falls into poverty. It's like, you know, we can blame politicians, we can blame government, you know, world governments or whatever. But really, if you can find evidence of this, if you could find the economic forces that have been taking place over centuries, you know, thousands of years even, if you can recognize those things, then now you can understand what it is that you have to do in order to be in that environment. Like, if you blame it on politicians, then you have to vote for somebody who's going to fix the system. The problem is they can't fix it. They can't fix the situation we are in. The separation between the rich and the poor can only go one direction. The moment that it flips the other way, everybody's falling into poverty. Now, I'm ready. Like, I mean, I don't know if I'm ready, you know, but I know, like, I understand what that would be like. You know, I've thought about it mentally, you know, like how I would position, how I would deal with that. But most people have not. And it would be a very chaotic experience. And, you know, if whether we're doing it by choice or force, it very well could come earlier than later. But again, like, this is the situation we are in, not the hypothetical one that we imagine could happen. Right? So understanding this is what we need to do, this is the situation we are in, and how it is that we need to conduct ourselves is very important. Right? We can wish and hope and dream for another situation. It don't matter. This is it. This is what we need to work with. Yeah. All right. Centuries-old economics still stands true today. A lot of those economic forces do. You know, some of them are very obscured because we have, you know, cell phones and airplanes and, you know, social networks and, you know, all kinds of stuff to mask over a lot of what was very obvious back in the day. But it doesn't mean the underlying economic forces aren't still active and at work. Like, they are very much there. You know, just because we fly in airplanes and we assume that we're going to make it to our destination doesn't mean that gravity doesn't exist the entire time we are flying to that destination. The moment that you run out of fuel, the natural forces take over. All right. What time is it? It's time for me to call it quits. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. This was a great live stream. We got 186 people watching with 71 likes, $2 in super chats. Thank you so much for the $2 super chat. I really appreciate you supporting the Uneducated Economist. And I would appreciate it if you go hit that like button before we end the live stream. We have 187 people watching with 72 likes. We could certainly get it up to over 100 likes before we end this. And I certainly appreciate you all being here and commenting. All right, you're comparing apples to oranges. Very nice. Thanks for the stream. Yeah, thank you for being here. 5-pin bowler. I'm in workman. Okay, I would be content with a tiny house on a little piece of property, big enough for a small farm and chickens, etc. Yeah, and that's the nice thing. If that is something that you would find a lot of, you know, happiness, content and happiness, and just being content, right? Who cares about happy? But if you can be content with that, that's cool, because really there's places in this country that you can still pick up a piece of property and have a little house and have all those things. But really, for most people, those type of conditions don't really give you a lot of ability to make a lot of money there. So, just because you have a nice house and a nice little piece of property that was fairly inexpensive doesn't mean that you can earn the money in that particular area in order to sustain that life. If you can make money independently away from like having like a location to go to or somebody to have to work for, so essentially you work for yourself, you work online, you do remote income somehow, then yeah, you could find a place anywhere in the country and just build yourself a little place, and you never know, you could probably find some very cheap, inexpensive land out there. But you have to have a condition within yourself, like, whether you're a capitalist or a property owner where you have rental income coming from other locations, or you're a remote worker or have a business like that. Most people aren't going to be able to do that. They have to work for somebody else. They have to have a 9-to-5 job. And your 9-to-5 job usually pays you, an amount that is, conditioned to that area. So even if you're, working in an area that's cheap, it doesn't mean you're going to earn enough to be able to buy in that area anyway. So, alrighty, guys, I got to call it. Uneducated Economist, you are awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for hitting that like button. We got it up to 98 likes. 2 more people, go hit that like button. We'll have it up over 100 before we end the live stream. YouTube algorithm will pick up the video, spread it around for more people to witness and view this video so that we can have a better conversation after it's uploaded. All right, I think I got it all. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.